Hi, Moral Recap here. Today I'm going to explain an American biographical film called Into the Wild. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. A couple is sleeping on their bed when the woman, Billy, listens to a voice calling her for help. She wakes up in the middle of the night saying that she heard Chris's voice. Her husband, Walt, wakes up as well. Billy tells him that this was not a dream and it was not an illusion. She heard their son's voice. A truck parks on a snowy road on a snowy landscape in Alaska. Chris steps off the car and thanks the driver for bringing him this far. The driver gives him a pair of boots and tells him they will keep his feet warm. He also tells him to give him a call if he makes it alive out there. The driver turns his truck around and drives away. Chris is now alone and walks into the wild. A short sequence shows us the first days of Chris being alone into the wild. He camps, he kills a bird, and grills it over a fire. Everything is quiet. One day, he stumbles upon a bus that seems to be empty and abandoned in the middle of nowhere. He takes a look, and the bus is indeed empty. Even its engine has been removed. Paradoxically, this bus is fully equipped with everything someone would need to spend his days in relative comfort. It has some cutlery, it has a bed, and it has a barrel which can be used to light a fire in it and warm the inside of the bus. Chris climbs on top of the bus and shouts if there's anyone around, just to be sure. There is not. Chris spends his days alone. He uses a knife to carve some words onto a wooden surface inside the bus. He also narrates his words, saying that he has been gone for 2 years. Away from cell phones and cigarettes, he feels free of cultural restraints. The film takes us 2 years back at a graduation ceremony. Chris's name gets called and he jumps onto the podium to receive his degree. While driving with his sister, Karine, he narrates her a poem about the typical life of an average person, how people want to find their perfect woman or perfect man, get married, and have children. They think that is going to make them happy, but to the contrary, that is going to make them suffer, and they are going to transfer their suffering to others. Chris and Karine join their parents at a restaurant and they congratulate him about his degree. While they talk, Walt says that they are going to support him if he goes to Harvard Law School, and they also want to buy him a new car. But Chris does not want a new car, and he makes it clear that he is not going to be fulfilled by material things. Chris's only care is to escape from the material world. He drives his car near a desert, and he is hit by a sandstorm at night. The next day, he sets his cash on fire, throws his car's templates in a garbage can, and starts on his journey. His parents can't reach him on the phone, and they drive to the apartment he has been supposedly living. A man informs them that Chris left 2 months ago. Walt asks Karine if she had any idea about this, but she didn't. Soon, Chris meets Jan and Rainey, who are 2 fellow travelers that pick him up with their van from the road. The 3 of them camp around the fire and get to talk for a while. Jan asks Chris about his parents and tells him that he looks like a kid that has received love. So how come he chose to leave like that? Chris phrases a poem and says that he needs truth more than love. Chris notices that Jan and Rainey are not very close. Rainey tries to approach Jan, but she keeps her distance. However, Chris's presence helps them come closer together and restore their bonds. One night, they have some fun in their tent. When they wake up the next morning, Chris has left a message on the sand for them, thanking them. Next, we see a short montage of Chris walking through various locations and trying to get someone to pick him up on the road. Karine's narration says that the police has notified Chris's parents that his car was found, but there are no signs of struggle or anything that would point to an act of crime. She says that her parents felt relieved at first, but then came to the realization that Chris does not want to be found. Chris meets a new friend, Wayne, and works with him at his corn gathering facility. One night, they sit down at a bar, and Chris tells him that he wants to go to Alaska. He asks Wayne if there is a library someplace nearby. He wants to get some books on hunting and meat preservation, but Wayne tells him he doesn't need that. He has a friend at work that knows everything about that stuff. Chris asks that guy and takes some notes. Meanwhile, Kareen's voiceover narrates that Chris's parents have hired a private investigator and have notified police nationwide about Chris. One day, Wayne gets arrested because he is mixed up in some illegal business, and Chris is on the road again. The next stop for Chris would be the river. He gets a kayak and paddles down the current. When he approaches on calm waters, he sees a young man and a young woman having fun by the shore. They greet him and invite him over. The guy, Mads, says they have hot dogs. Chris spends some time with them, and Mads tells him that if he paddles along this river, he will eventually get to Mexico, and that makes Chris excited. Sirens are heard from the distance. Chris says this must be the river patrol coming after him. He should have a permit to paddle down the river, but he didn't get any. He says goodbye and leaves. Chris crosses the borders to Mexico through the river, but is caught by the police. He tells them how he got there, and they tell him he can't just cross through states without having an identification. Chris catches a train to cross back to the United States and visits a help center for the homeless. He walks up to the front desk and tells the clerk that he has lost his documents. The woman tells him to fill an application for a new ID, and Chris gives her the name Alexander Supertramp. He also asks her if she can give him a bed to sleep for the night. Chris takes a walk around and gets in contact with the culture he so much despises. He looks at some people having fun in a bar, and he imagines what it would be like if he was one of them. That thought feels disgusting to him. He returns back to the help center and grabs his stuff. He tells the clerk that he is not going to be needing that bed after all. And so, Chris is back on the road. He gets on the train again, but this time, the staff has spotted him and one of them gets him. He says he never forgets a face and serves him a good beating. He tells Chris that this is the last time he travels for free with the railroad. After that, Chris gets a job at a restaurant. Apparently, his supervisor knows about his intention to go to Alaska and tells him she wants to help him, but he has to wear socks at work. We are taken to the present day for a moment. Chris spots a moose and kills it with his rifle. He tries to put into practice what he learned about preserving the meat, but he fails. Flies and worms get all over the meat, and he can't eat it anymore. That makes him go mad, and he starts reciting phrases from one of the fights his parents have had in the past. We are taken back again 4 months before Chris goes to Alaska. He visits a small hippie community, and he meets Jan and Rainey there. He also meets a new person, Tracy, a young girl who likes him, and he likes back. One night, Jan tells him that she was in Tracy's age when she got pregnant, and decides to talk to him about her own son and how Chris reminds her of him. The following days, Chris and Tracy spend a lot of time together, and they get a chance to get intimate with each other. But as it seems, Tracy is just 16 years old, and they don't proceed any further. Chris has to leave and greets Tracy, telling her that she is very talented and she can do anything she sets her mind to. Chris now meets Ron, an old man who lives alone in a small house. Ron tells Chris that he needs to get a job and make something of his life. Although he can't understand Chris's adventure just yet, he takes him to his house and shares his life story with him. He also tells Chris that he keeps a workshop in his garage and works on carving leather. They go to the garage, and that's where Chris gets the brown leather belt that he later wears to Alaska. On the belt, Chris carves his whole trip from beginning to end. Chris tells Ron that he is a stubborn man that sits on his butt but has still some life in him. Although they have very different objectives, they should go after them. Things are getting more and more difficult for Chris in Alaska. He can't get any food. He is starving and has run out of resources, but he also can't get anywhere because the currents of the rivers have become way too aggressive. He eats whatever plants he thinks are edible. He also tries to keep reading books in order to keep his mind focused elsewhere, but the excessive hunger won't let him find peace. The next morning, he wakes up and he is feeling weak. He literally has to drag himself around. He drinks some water and then opens a book that he uses as a reference to various plants. In the book, he finds a plant he ate. The book describes the plant by saying that it causes paralysis and nausea. We get to actually read the words starvation and death. He starts crying and feels despaired. He walks out of the bus and we see he has become very thin. In an instant, a bear walks in front of him and Chris stays still. Fortunately for him, the bear walks past him without hurting him. Another flashback takes us back to the moment where Chris and Ron say goodbye. Ron tells Chris that he has no other family, and since Chris is not getting along with his family, he could adopt him and be his grandfather. Chris tells him that this could wait until he gets back from Alaska, and they can discuss it then. Lastly, we see Chris in the bus. He writes a note that says he lived a happy life, and he thanks God for that. He looks into the sun and sees visions of himself running in the arms of his parents. Eventually, a smile shapes onto his face, as he has no other choice but to surrender. An on-screen text informs us that Chris was found dead in the bus 2 weeks later by some moose hunters. Subscribe and hit that like button to help our channel grow. Turn the notifications on so you won't miss any of our new videos. Thanks for watching.